Today I will be presenting Webinar 2, The Building Blocks of Group Travel. As I mentioned, my name is Sean Ginn. I'm the Customer Experience Manager here at EF Tours for Girl Scouts. What we will be covering today are hotels, meals, transportation, tour customizations. How can you make this tour itinerary the best fit for your group? And I'll also quickly highlight where we are in the current process of matching groups together. Let's first start with hotels. How do we choose our hotels that we use on tour? Firstly, we review these hotels each year to ensure that the quality is at these high EF standards. We mean safety standards, cleanliness standards, the private bathrooms in suite for each room. We review those. We have an entire team called the Source and Contracting Team that follows up on these each year to make sure they are up to par. On top of that, we also have tour directors on the ground that are actually visiting these hotels when they're on tour and making sure they are up to these standards and reporting back to us. So not only do we have an entire team do at least a once a year check-in to make sure these are up to our standards, we have these pop-ins from our tour directors to make sure the quality is kept up throughout the year. Hotels we use know our groups. We go back to these high-rated hotels that we get each year because they know who we are. We're bringing groups of 35 to 40 Girl Scouts that is probably their first time traveling internationally. They know that we want to make sure we keep chaperones close by to girls. They know that girls may be hanging out in the lobby in order to get Wi-Fi. They know who our groups are, so they're much more accommodating of them. And they also love us. Our hotels are located outside of the city, about 1 hour outside of the city. And these hotels are either accessible by bus or public transportation. Rooms for the girls in these hotels will be by an adult, but they're not going to be directly adjacent. So we will make sure an adult in your group is nearby these girls, but each parent is not going to be directly adjacent to their daughter. Make sure that's understood from your group. And hotel information is finalized and released to you 3 weeks prior to tour. It will be released directly to your group leader website. Something to remember is that hotels on tour are strictly a place to sleep. You have minimal time that is spent at your hotel. They're meant to be comfortable and safe. You are up bright and early, around 7, heading out by 8 a.m. You spend the entirety of the day outside of your hotel. Get back around 9 to 10 p.m. after dinner, and that's when you basically shower up and head to bed. So because these hotels are strictly a place to sleep, I wanted to highlight some of the amenity differences that international hotels have compared to American hotels. 1, air conditioning is quite uncommon, so don't expect to have air conditioning in your hotels. And even when it is available, the temperature is moderately set and controlled by the hotel staff. Water pressure is not going to be as strong in these hotels. That's really due to environmental conservation. Outside of the US, they make quite strong efforts in these hotels to be as environmentally conscious as possible. Also, some of the smaller family-run hotels rely on hot water tanks, not these massive water heaters like we're used to. So you want to make sure in these hotels, you're taking efficient showers so that the first person doesn't use up all the hot water for the 2 or 3 girls that are remaining in the room. Elevators are scarce, so you need to be prepared to climb stairs and carry your luggage, about 3 to 4 floors. Wi-Fi may only be available in the hotel lobby or at an additional charge. And basic toiletries like shampoos, lotions, washcloths especially, are not offered in these hotels. So if you're a washcloth gal or a loofah, make sure you bring that along. I always see a couple comments in the tour evaluations, so I want to make sure I highlighted it here. And these rooms are space efficient. They don't usually have lounge areas like we are used to here in American hotels. They're really strictly a place to sleep, store your luggage, use the restroom. Diving right on in, let's look at meals. Meals on tour are going to be a combination of local cuisine while still being familiar. We have to remember that this is a tour for Girl Scouts. So we want to make sure they're getting something authentic while still balancing the needs of girls anywhere from age 11 to 18. Included meals on tour are preset. So breakfast at the hotel is continental style. Let's say for European breakfasts, a lot of these are going to just be pastries, deli meats, coffee, very light. In Latin America, in Australia, in Japan, these other locations, they are known to include a hot option like eggs or sausage. In Latin America, maybe rice and beans or some other local delicacies. In Japan specifically, they're well known to be using last night's leftovers in some kind of creative dish for breakfast. The biggest takeaway is that these are continental style, so you'll be serving yourself. Lunches and dinners on tour are a mix of hotel and restaurant meals. And this is where the preset comes in. If you have a lunch included on your tour or a dinner, which majority do, these are not meals you get to pick ahead of time or when you arrive. These are preset for each and every traveler. So as you arrive to the restaurant, the food is being cooked, and each traveler is going to be served the same exact meal. Obviously, if you have somebody with some dietary restrictions, let us know about these dietary restrictions, because we'll make sure that we can do our best to accommodate these things. Now, when I say dietary restrictions, let's break this down from dietary restrictions to picky eaters. If somebody requests vegetarian, they need to keep that consistent request throughout the tour. So we want to make sure that these requests are not for people who are asking for no onions or no mushrooms. We ask our travelers to be adventurous when they're visiting these new locations. However, if there is someone who's legitimately vegetarian or gluten-free, etc., like I said, let us know, because we will set the expectation with you how other countries have the ability to accommodate these needs. Not all these countries are as up to date as the US are. So depending on your location, once we hear this dietary restriction, we'll let you know how well they're able to accommodate it. And you'll also see this through several different touch points. We'll confirm those dietary restrictions with you here at EF. The tour director will also continually confirm these dietary restrictions throughout the tour, even when you're at each restaurant. They'll be asking very specific questions each and every time because they want to make sure that this food restriction, this dietary restriction, is met to the utmost degree. So if you feel like you're getting the repetitive question on this, it's only to make sure that we are getting this absolutely right. Dietary restrictions are nothing to take anything but seriously, and we want to make sure we do that. Transportation. How are we getting around tour here? Let's look at international flights. Everyone will be taking one of these. Nearly all flight itineraries will include at least 2 layovers, meaning at least a layover on the way there and one on the way back. All departure flights to Europe are overnight flights. Also, flights to Japan, Australia do include overnight flights as well. If you're a group in the West Coast flying to Latin America, those are also going to be overnight flights. Others that are traveling to Latin America usually have quite an early morning departure to arrive for later that evening. We work through group reservations with the airline. What I mean by this is we bring so many travelers to the airlines each year, we're able to work out special deals with these airlines in order to get the best possible savings to pass on to you, the travelers. We do this through these group contracts and group reservations. Because we're able to get these great rates, there's some things that group reservations cannot guarantee. We cannot take specific seat assignments. We cannot have people assigned to a window seat or an aisle seat or a safety row seat. How we handle seat assignments with the airlines is the airlines knows we're a group travel company. They give us small blocks of seats throughout the airline. So let's say you're a group of 12. Don't expect to have all 12 of your travelers sitting in one location. You can expect about 3 to 4 small pockets of travelers. We'll have a traveler near an adult, but scattered throughout the plane. Upgrades. As I mentioned, the exit row is not a possibility. Upgrades to first class or business class or economy comfort also cannot be done through us here at EF. You cannot apply your frequent flyer miles through us here at EF. And last but not least, online check-in is not always available. Each year, the airlines are getting better and better, but we always are going to suggest that you check in at the gate physically at that airport, because that's where we know you can get a guaranteed check-in that will be thorough and have everybody well taken care of. So you land, how are you getting around on tour? Well, let me tell you, it's a coach bus. That's going to be your main source of transportation while on tour. These buses will not have bathrooms available for use, so please make sure everybody uses the restroom stops as frequently as possible. Another thing to note is that roads while abroad, they're going to be developed and maintained differently than they are here in the US. But don't worry about it, these bus drivers know their stuff. So I'm thinking roads in Latin America or the windy mountain roads of Switzerland. Sometimes these roads can seem more narrow and windy than we're used to at home. These bus drivers are quite familiar with the area and they're driving these roads each and every day. So they're going to make sure and guarantee your safety. And a little quick note, we always have these bus drivers, especially ones that are with you for the majority of tour, get really, really close with the group. So I encourage you to treat them just as any of the other Girl Scouts you're traveling with. Get them a swap, say hello, say what's good, hit them a fist bump, really make them feel a part because they're with you every single kilometer, mile of this tour itinerary. The metro. Most major cities will include public transportation to get around. That means the metro, the tube, whatever you want to call it. The reason for this is we want you to travel like a local, and people in cities use these public transportations. It also is a great way to avoid traffic. So especially during rush hour, even though the trains will be a little bit busier, you will be getting onto a train and traveling much more efficiently than sitting in 2 hours worth of London traffic. So tour directors will go over the route and best practices for riding before you get to each stop. So he, she, they will make sure everyone understands what direction they're going in, the stop they need to get off at, and how many stops or transfers that will include. Last but not least, walking. Quite a bit of walking on our tours because it's the best way to experience a city. Days on tour will reach up to 7 to 10 miles. This is including uneven roads, cobblestone streets, and quite a few sets of stairs. The group's pace can be fast at times as well, and everyone is expected to keep up. Now, the pace is not purposely done to be fast. There could be quite a few reasons why the group's pace could be picking up at certain times. And the name of the game is making reservation times. When you're traveling with a large group, it means there's going to be unplanned delays. Those travelers that take an unplanned photo stop while everybody is walking to their next reservation. Traffic lights when you're trying to cross a street and not having the entire group of 40 make that first traffic light. Or maybe there's some type of parade or road closure that was not announced ahead of time. These things can really cut into the group's time. And if you're trying to make a reservation that you absolutely need to make in order to get into that entrance or that museum, the tour director is going to let you know, hey, it's time to pick up the pace. Everybody come on with me. He, she, or they will let you know, but you are going to be expected to keep up during those times. And the reason I cover this in such detail is that direct traveler feedback on the tour evaluations I review each and every summer. I read through every single one we get. We have direct traveler feedback that not being prepared for the amount of walking and the pace truly affects the traveler's experience. So the takeaway from this is it's important to prepare together. This is not something you want to just inform your group of. Hey, there's going to be a lot of walking and sometimes it's a quick pace. This is one you're going to want to prepare for together. We here at EF, because we see this coming up in tour evaluations more often, are taking a few different approaches to help our groups be well better prepared. One, I really dove into some detail on this webinar slide, more than I have in previous years. Another thing is we're releasing different marketing material to help align with what we're expecting. We actually just had written a brand new blog post talking about what this looks like on tour. This blog post can be easily found in our blog on the tour website. We have one here that talks about getting fit for tour. It talks about the amount of walking you'll be averaging, what it's like to be carrying your luggage throughout these staircases, how the days are long. Assign your group. This document to read. Have them come to a meeting. Break down what you guys had, break down what they have read, assign different parts. That's what I mean. It's important to prepare together. Don't just send them this link and expect them to read it. Get them involved. Make a whole meeting around it. We have groups of travelers that do walking together. They make some of their meetings walking meetings, where they're walking the track as they're presenting what they need to present. Make sure you're going that extra effort to make sure each person understands this to the utmost extent, and we'll be doing the same here at EF Tours. Continuing on walking and highlighting some mobility restrictions. Most countries do not accommodate mobility needs like they do here in the United States. There is no Americans with Disability Act or ADA or any kind of version of that really located in these other countries. These places that you're visiting are much, much older than the United States even is as a country. So these buildings do not have times when elevators or escalators or handicap accessible routes were required or expected to be included. So have a conversation with all your travelers, especially your adults, about their capabilities. What is a traveler capable of on tour? If they do have any kind of restriction, how severe is it? How long are they able to walk before they need a rest? What kind of pace can they keep up with? Can they pick up the pace if need be? These are the kinds of questions we want you to have asked and understood for each of your travelers. And if you do have a traveler with mobility issues, it's important to let us know ASAP. This way, we can help further set expectations for what this traveler is going to need to do, like who's going to be accompanying them if the group needs to continue on while this traveler rests. How can we prepare them to budget money for taxis or things like this? We do not want any mobility restriction to be a huge hindrance to them on tour. The way that we can better accommodate these things is to have an open conversation with them, an open conversation with you so that we can understand the needs and best accommodate them. So please make sure you have an honest conversation with your travelers. Some of you will be doing some more high-speed train travel, whether you're taking the Eurostar from London to Paris, the AVE train, or the TGV while in Spain. And these are just high-speed train travel between different cities. It's a similar experience to boarding a flight. There will be customs, security, arrival time, early arrival times, etc. We have one tour with a night train, but it's quite a popular tour, London, Paris, Florence, and Rome. So I wanted to highlight this. I also love to highlight it because it's a Girl Scout favorite. This is a train that you take overnight and sleep in. Each of your group will be staying in coachettes, which seats and sleeps 6 people. On this night train, room upgrades are not going to be available. So you should set the expectation that every person is going to be sleeping in these couchettes of 6. And this is similar to an overnight flight experience. Not just the security and the customs, as I mentioned before with the other train, but there's shared restrooms at the end of each cart. It's a very similar to a sleepover experience where where these girls might be chatting, might not be getting a full night's sleep. Also, there's only space for a carry-on bag. Similarly to on an airplane, you're going to need to keep that within very close quarters. So you're going to want to make sure you're strictly packing in a carry-on bag. The overnight ferry. This is included on the Italy and Greece trip. This is just what it sounds like, a ferry that you take overnight that you'll be spending an evening in. This ferry is public transportation, so there's going to be non-EF groups that will be using this ferry. While you all will have your own specific rooms, not all people taking the ferry end up having their own room. So it's common to see people sleeping in lounge areas, etc. But as I mentioned, you'll be having your own private rooms, and these rooming breakdowns are just like the hotels. They will have private rooms and private bathrooms. And we will do our best to accommodate anybody who has a rooming upgrade. But there's physically not as many single rooms and double rooms on a night ferry as there are in these hotels. So room upgrades are based on availability. And if we are not able to accommodate your upgrade or one of your travelers' upgrades while on the overnight ferry, you will of course be reimbursed for that come post-tour. On these night ferries, before you all head to sleep, there's quite a few amenities. There's restaurants, cafes. On a ferry that I have been on, there was a small movie viewing, a game room. These are places that the girls can really hang out, stretch their legs, explore around before they get to bed. It's another favorite of our Girl Scouts. Awesome. So we talked through the brick and mortar parts of the tour, what hotels, what transport is like, what meals it's like. What are some ways that you can customize your tour to make it best fitting to your group? First is special travel. I highlighted this in the previous webinar, but I wanted to dive into some of the guidelines of it. So as a reminder, special travel is when a traveler changes their flights to arrive prior to tour, stay behind after tour when the rest of the group goes home, or depart from or return to a different home airport. If you have any travelers doing special travel, two very important things that they need to understand, and you as the group leader. One, they will be on different flights than the rest of the group, on the way there and on the way back. And anybody who's taking part in special travel will need to make sure they're responsible for getting their own transportation. So if they arrive prior to tour, it's on the traveler to meet up with the group at the first hotel or on the ground on tour. If they're staying after the rest of the group leaves, then they must get themselves to their departing airport on their own and their own cost. We have two separate types of special travel. We have group special travel, which is when you have 6 or more paying travelers requesting the exact same request to stay 3 days after tour and return from the same airport. If you have any less than that, it is called an individual special travel request. This comes at a flat fee of $150, while the group special travel comes at a fee of $95 per traveler. If you choose to take either bit of these group special travel or individual special travel, and let's say you also want to change the gateway you are flying home from, this change in gateway will come at an additional cost depending on which gateway you choose. So if you have something like this in mind, make sure you check in with us here so we can tell you what that exact cost will look like. Optional excursions. So I covered these a little bit in the last webinar as well, but a few more details here. We require a certain amount of travelers to run each of these optional excursions. So take a look at who you have added on these excursions. If it's not everybody, make sure you take note because those who do not take part will have free time in the city that you're located in. If you have travelers that are not taking part, Girl Scouts specifically, you'll need to make sure that there's an adult not taking part in the excursion as well. That's why we always recommend to require these for your group if you'd like to include them, because that way it makes your job easier to make sure everybody's where they need to be. What happens if we don't meet this certain amount of travelers required to run? If we do not meet those minimum numbers, travelers will be refunded post-tour. Now, you may be asking, why are we not refunded until after the trip returns? The reason for this is that we will do every single thing possible in order to get these excursions to run. A lot of these excursions are able to be added while you're on tour. So if we're only a couple that are behind and people end up adding it on tour, you would hit those numbers and you would get to take part in that excursion. We also, as I mentioned, will really try to do everything possible we can. I have seen groups be combined with other groups for a half an afternoon in order to take part. And I don't mean groups that you're traveling with. I mean an entire different group that's traveling with an entirely different tour director. We will try to make as many of these puzzle pieces shift together in order to make your tour itinerary work. And if after all of that, we're unable to get an excursion to run, we'll go ahead and make sure you are refunded post-tour. One thing to note is that Versailles, it's our most popular excursion and included on so many of our itineraries because a majority of our European itineraries do go through Paris. This has an extremely strict deadline. If you miss this deadline and have somebody who wants to be added or removed from the excursion, we are not going to be able to accommodate this. So make sure if Versailles is included on your tour, you take a look at this deadline on your to-do list. It's located under the excursions one. Make sure you keep this strongly in mind because we're unable to make any exceptions for late additions or removals. Tour director optional excursions. So your tour director can offer their own excursions. They can put these together through their own personal relationship or their own personal expertise of the area. Excursions are available. The excursions that are available and the cost of these excursions can vary depending on what the tour director's relationships are, how many people are going to be signing up for these excursions. But don't worry, you can check with your tour consultant for common options available in the countries you're going to or the cities you're going to, and a cost bracket of where that could fall so your girls can budget for these ahead of time. And then when your tour director reaches out, they will let you know the exact options available prior to tour. Tour extensions. So some tour itineraries have additional pre-built days you can add on to the end of the tour. If this is something that you have not added, I wanted to make a quick note. Extensions are all or nothing for your group. That means if you're adding it on, every person in your group has to have that added on. So if you are looking to add this, make sure you consult the entirety of your group. The deadline to do this is listed on your to-do list. So if you're still debating this, make sure you get that deadline from your to-do list and get it done before that time. We here at EF require 20 paying travelers. Let me read it from the slide correctly here. 20 paying travelers are required for an extension to run. We don't require your group to be 20 paying travelers, however. This is where group travel comes in. We combine your group with others requesting the extension. So if the required number to run is not reached for this extension, one, we will look at other possible dates where this extension is running, and we can give your option to the group to move to that date. We can run the extension privately for an increased cost. And if we go through all these options and do not find one that suits your entire group, we will remove the extension and every traveler will be receiving a refund. On the same note, let's look at how we're matching troops together. Right now, I am currently working with our dedicated flight specialist, pictured down in the right-hand corner, Lucy Timkova, to match groups on the same tour within the same date range. Similarly to extensions, these tours have required numbers to run. So if there aren't enough groups requesting the same tour within the same date range, we have options. One, we'll look at other possible dates that your group can travel and when we have your tour traveling. Two, we can look at an alternative tour itinerary. Or three, we can run the tour privately at an additional cost. Now, one thing I want to highlight with this is that I handle all these groups individually. I am starting to look at these groups right now with our flights coordinator, and will be reaching out to groups all the way through December, for those that do not have enough travelers in order to run. The reason for that deadline is we allow groups to change tour or change dates up to that time. So I will be working through November and through December, reaching out to these few groups that may be affected by this. Now, the name of the game here is remember that we are all in this together. I handle this portion of our tours each and every year, and I will be personally handling any situation again that comes up this year. So I'll be working with you, the group leader, who knows their girls best, who knows what's most important to them, what dates they have available, and we will work to make sure we find the perfect solution to you and your girls. With that being said, we have come to the end of our presentation here, and I will be answering any and all questions that have come in. So give me one quick moment to go ahead and get this pulled up here. All righty, so we have a few questions here. How far in advance and how do we report dietary restrictions? So There is a deadline listed on your to-do list, but let us know sooner rather than later. That way, we can just set these expectations for you earlier. Next, can a group request early morning flights or longer layovers to ensure making your next connection? So I believe it was you, Karen, that asked this question. Reach out to your tour consultant specifically. Let's take a look at the flight patterns for your tour and we can chat through that more there. That's a bit of an individual question, but we can make sure we get that addressed. Is the night train part of the London to Lucerne trip? It is not. The night train is only part of the London, Paris, Florence, and Rome itinerary. I have a rather specific individual question here. For a tour with the cruise, is the drink package included in the cost? That is correct. There is a drink package included in the cost for non-alcoholic drinks. For the specifics, please feel free to reach out to your tour consultant and they can let you know everything that is included in that cruise package. Any information on the ferry from Dublin to Wales? I had actually done this ferry personally, and there's not too much to cover for it. It's quite similar to the overnight ferry, just you don't travel overnight. I don't do the best on boats. I get a little bit motion sickness, so I chose to take a Dramamine and sleep through my ferry ride. But it's very similar to the overnight ferry in the sense of it's public transportation, so there's numerous other people that are non-EF groups on it. It also has cafes, lunch, like a restaurant, a movie option. There was a small TV viewing room, a game room. So it's rather similar, just not overnight. If 6 or more travelers want to book their own flights both ways, do they get a refund from the tour price? This is a rather specific question that I recommend you reach out directly to me for. We don't suggest a large amount of travelers book their own flights as it gets quite hairy. So in order to address this more individually, please send me an email directly and we can talk about that more in depth. How long before tour will you learn about size limitations, as in extra charges or the excursions may be canceled if the group is too small? So, as I mentioned, I will be reaching out throughout the winter about tours that in extensions that do not have enough travelers. For excursions, you will not learn until prior to tour if we do not have enough in order to make that run. And as I mentioned, we will do everything we can on tour in order to get that to run. But if an excursion cannot run, we'll talk through some of the options of what you can do with your free time there, etc. And that will be just about a month prior to departure. Does the Grand Tour of Italy have a night train? It does not that I know of off the top of my head. We got a question here, when will we get the final travel dates? Now, this was not something that I had addressed in this webinar. It was a previous webinar, but we guarantee your date to be confirmed 2 months prior to departure. The exact day breakdown is 70 days, but let's make it something that everyone works with, which is 2 months prior to departure. You should be setting the expectation with your group that they will not have the final date until that time. Now, we do get them earlier each year for some groups. So as soon as we do get that date, we will let you know. But in order to deal with the large amount of incoming questions of when that will be coming in, set that expectation of 2 months prior. One quick moment. Alrighty here. Give me one quick moment. I have quite a few questions. We only have 5 travelers. Will I still be considered a group leader? Yes, you will, Heather. You will be still considered a group leader. Without getting too much into details, because I don't know your specific group setup, you can travel with that group size. That just means that you will have a cost for your tour if you're on that 6-to-1 model. For every 6 paying travelers, you receive 1 free group leader spot. If you only have 5, you will be receiving a discounted spot. You can get that cost specifically from your tour consultant. Can I talk more about the time on the bus in Latin America? Concerned about the lack of bathrooms. So I won't go too specifically into how long you're going to be on the bus. That will come much closer to tour. But let's talk generally, because this is a very great question. We are prepared for these buses not to have bathrooms included on them. Numerous stops are made while you're on those longer transfer days, and the tour director will constantly be reminding your group to take use of this bathroom. What it's your job as the group leader to do is ensure your girls are truly taking advantage of that time. So we will build in enough bathroom stops for each person to be comfortable. But you need to make sure people are not taking these for granted and using them. Extension for London to Lucerne. Is that by bus? That is correct. So when you travel from Switzerland to Italy, that is a long bus transfer day. I have a couple individual questions. Let me please take a moment to follow up to these here. Awesome. I have a couple more questions I'm going to be answering. Let's see here. All right. Does Costa Rica have any overnight rides? You do not. You may have an overnight flight depending where you're coming from, but no trains or bus rides or anything like that. We do not know which group we are traveling with. When do we find out? You will be introduced to the other groups you're traveling with around April to May so that you can connect with the other groups, learn how the breakdown of those groups are, and get to know each other a bit so you can land as one cohesive group as opposed to 4 individual groups. We have a girl whose father is changing duty stations. What are her options to still travel with the group? That's a great question. You will want the parents of this girl to contact our customer service team as soon as they can. We have the ability to change the gateway that she will fly from. So let's say, Donna, you are flying out of New York, just for conversation's sake, and she's moving to Florida. She can change the gateway she flies out of to be Orlando and meet up with the group at the final destination in Europe or wherever you're going. That will come at a cost, but the customer service representative, our traveler support specialists, they can cover that, the exact costs, because it changes depending on where they're looking to fly from. As I had mentioned, I will be working for any extension or tour that doesn't have enough people to run throughout the winter. So that will be through November, December, and a little bit into January if we have any delay with the holidays. But I'll be in contact with you throughout November and December. This is a great question. If our 3-day extension does not run due to enough people, do we still stay out there somewhere for those 3 days, or would our tour be done at day 7? So if there is not enough people to run the extension and you choose not to take that on your own and do it privately, you would be leaving at the end of the tour, not doing those 3 days of the extension. So you would be done at day 7. I'm not sure your exact tour, Randy, so I don't want to just say that exact day number, but you would not be there for an additional 3 days. All right. I think I have addressed all questions, but please take a moment to resend any question you feel I had missed or not addressed in full, and we can make sure we get those addressed. If anybody had a very specific question that I messaged you about directly, feel free to stay a little bit later and I have no problem getting this taken care of.